City take on Newcastle without Rodri. All the talk is about, is this a season-ending injury? Not only for Rodri, but also for City or Arsenal, absolute favourites. But Newcastle are also involved in this picture. But you had that astonishing game last season where De Bruyne came off the bench, played that pass to Oscar Bob, and came back with the fresh trim and everything else. He potentially could also be out, but the main man for this is, for me, Haaland. If you can stop Haaland, you can stop City.
Yeah, absolutely. And he's coming up against Dan Burn and Shaw, both pretty good players, but you'd fancy Haaland if he gets a chance. He should bag. I think this is going to be a really, really difficult game for City. It's always a tough place to go, Newcastle. I think I've been 3 times in the away end. I've never seen us win. Very, very quick on the counter, particularly Harvey Barnes is playing unbelievable at the moment. Anthony Gordon's just, every game just justifies why he's in the England team. And that's kind of been City's Achilles heel over the last season and a half, really, is that vulnerability on the counter-attack. We kind of saw it at the weekend as well. Few little half chances that were created from City's own corner that kind of gifted Arsenal a few chances. And I think that's kind of how I expect this game to play out a little bit. I think Newcastle have been pretty impressive this season, to be honest. I mean, obviously they just lost 3-1 to Fulham, which I don't think many people saw. But I think they've got quite a good balance to the team. They've got, obviously, as I say, quick wingers. They've got Alexander Isak, who hasn't been in incredible form, but you know what he's capable of. I think the defence is where City are going to try and get at them. And I think Savio is going to be really important. I think he's been fantastic so far this season. And of course, Haaland, you give him a chance and he'll score. But I, as a City fan, I'm really nervous about this game. You never like the 12:30. You never like the early kickoff. St James's Park. It's going to be proper raucous atmosphere. And of course, Guardiola will be trying to figure out the Rodri conundrum. I don't know who's going to play there. At the moment, it might be a link-up of both Kovacic and Gundogan, but obviously that remains to be seen. But yeah, really, really tough test for City.
I look at this and I think, actually, interestingly, I think on both ends, there's an opportunity for both teams because there's no Rodri, so in transition, there'll be more space in that position for sure. That midfield three of Newcastle, of Willock, Joel Linton, Bruno Guimaraes, they're bullies, they're physical, and City could be Kovacic and Gundogan, or Kovacic and Rico Lewis, just isn't as scary. And then, as you mentioned, Gordon and Barnes on the counter-attack. This feels... I don't want to say it too loudly because it could end up being 5-0 to City, but this feels like an even contest, or Newcastle have a better chance than they might do on other days.
Yeah, Newcastle do have a chance in this one, and like him rightly pointed out, 12:30 kickoffs. I'm big into kickoff times, and I feel like when everyone's watching, and this is a possible acca buster, this is where sometimes teams slip up. And if you take your mind back to last season before City went on that incredible run, I think it was beginning of December. Yeah, beginning of December when they lost against Aston Villa. They drew against Liverpool. They drew against Spurs. They drew against Chelsea. And they lost against Aston Villa. So 5 games, and I think they dropped points in 4 of them. And sometimes when City slip up, they go on a little bit of a wobble. Not to say they're going to lose at St James's Park, but I think it's a City team that are vulnerable, or more vulnerable than they have been in a long time without Rodri in that team. But it's a Newcastle side that also do have problems. They are a side that lost their last game, 3-1 against Fulham. It's a Newcastle side that in the boardroom, there's problems. Paul Mitchell did an interview and called out the recruitment process, and Eddie Howe's also been... You can say he's just not been too happy how things have gone since Paul Mitchell's come into the football club. And so it's not going swimmingly at St James's Park, but I think with a bit between their teeth against a City team that are a little bit vulnerable, they've got a big chance of getting something from this game.
I think what you say there, actually, about City kind of the losses coming in waves makes this game really, really important. And it is something which I've seen over the last few years, is that when City do lose a game, they often go on to, a couple draws here or there, or maybe another loss. And I think without Rodri now, these next 3 or 4 games are going to be really, really important. I think if City can go to St James's Park and just blow Newcastle out of the water and play the best football that we know they can play and show that they don't miss Rodri at all, I think that's like a huge stamp on the Premier League of it doesn't matter what happens to us, we're here and we're here to win it. I think if they lose, I think heads could drop. I would imagine, although we always talk about City being this juggernaut and all the players being like this winning machine, I would imagine every single City player in training this week has felt a little bit low or a little bit uncomfortable at the fact that Rodri isn't there. Not only because they love him as a mate and he's probably out for the season, but because they know how important he is to that side. And I think that morale will probably be a bit lower. And a loss here could potentially, we don't know because it's Man City and it's Guardiola, but it could potentially lead to a slight slip in form.
I think we'll come back to Newcastle in a second. This City thing I find really interesting because the flip side of this is Guardiola fans are fixed. And that's why I think this is actually fascinating, because I remember the season you played Delph at left back for a while, he found a fix then. Last season, De Bruyne and Haaland were out for a while, he found a fix then. This, in my opinion, is probably his biggest test, where he's lost a number 6, doesn't have another number 6. All the other options are either Rico Lewis, who's a kid, or other guys who are aging or don't play that position. This is the first time where I think he's got to go, if we get another injury, if Haaland's out for 3 months, they're in serious trouble.
Yeah.
And it did happen last season, but the benefit that he's got, the upside of Haaland, is he's already on 9 goals, is it? 10 goals now. He's already on 10 goals this season. So like trying to stop him feels fairly impossible. On Newcastle, what is a good season for them? I'm so confused by what Newcastle are at the moment.
Yeah, well, I think the results at the beginning of the season were a misnomer. Before they lost against Fulham, they were unbeaten. But I've watched Newcastle games this season and they've not been very good. It's difficult for them right now because there's uncertainty around Eddie Howe and they might be trying to quieten down that noise, but it's evident, right? The England job's up for grabs. His future's uncertain. There's discontent in terms of the boardroom with him and Paul Mitchell. And so for them, I think getting back into Europe is a good season. I think top 4 is a little bit unrealistic, but getting back into Europa League or Conference League and going on a decent run in the Cup is a good season for Newcastle. They didn't strengthen really in the summer, and this is ostensibly supposed to be the richest club in the world, and they can't go and spend the money they want to spend. They had to sell Elliot Anderson to balance the books. They couldn't bring in Mark Guehi, and when you look at a defensive partnership of Fabian Schär and Dan Burn, they're both decent Premier League centre-backs in their own right, but this is not a centre-back partnership that gets you into the top 4. And I know they're missing players for injury. Botman's out till the new year, and Jamal Lascelles is out as well with an injury. But this is a side that hasn't necessarily impressed me this season. What I will bank on is that they've got one of the top 2 strikers in the Premier League in Isak. I think he's behind Haaland in terms of front men, and he hasn't really hit form this season. I know last game he was struggling with an injury, but he will eventually start scoring goals, and I think this might be the weekend for him to do it. He loves a big occasion, he loves big opponents, and I think that with this City side kind of in flux, it's a great chance for him to make a mark this year.
Yeah, I think there's no reason why Newcastle can't push for Europe. I think, as you say, with a couple of the injuries that they have at the moment, the back 4 is clearly a weak link. But you look at the midfield, I mean, Joelinton and Kim Rice are absolutely fantastic players. I wouldn't mind either of them at City. And then the front 3 on their day, absolutely electric. And as you mentioned, Alexander Isak, I think they could go on a really, really, really good run. As you sort of said before, I think the midfield battle, and this one's going to be really, really important. If you were both Pep Guardiola now, who would you be playing in that number 6 role? Would you directly swap one player in, or would you try and play 2 in there to cover the hole that Rodri leaves?
I'd go 2. I'll go 2 in there.
And who would they be?
And yeah, I look at this Newcastle midfield as well, and yeah, decent, but Guimaraes has had a difficult start to the season. Being a bit rash. He's lost his head a few times. He's obviously got the captain's armband at the moment. I don't know if he's that kind of player that can burden that responsibility as well as concentrating on his own game. And we've seen that at parts where Newcastle have struggled with that midfield. It's been because he's not been up to it. And so I think City put another man in there. They dominate possession. They frustrate Newcastle. That's the best way they can get a result. But because you are lacking that Rodri factor, Newcastle will probably be a bit more emboldened at home, 12:30 kickoff, fans behind them. I think that's what gives them a chance in this game.
In terms of options in midfield, honestly, I've got no idea. I wouldn't start Rico Lewis in there in this game. I don't think physicality is his sort of game. And Newcastle, as we know, and I think the big caveat to this is how up for it are Newcastle going to be? Because so far when I've watched them this season, every game doesn't feel like they're actually in that first season of Eddie Howe, like it felt horrible to go to St James's. Now it feels like it's just another normal game. If they take the lead, yes, they're on it. But if they go behind, they're in trouble. So I think physically, I wouldn't start Rico Lewis. I'd probably drop Gundogan in and play him alongside Kovacic. I can see Grealish playing more as an 8 at some point this season.
I think Grealish is going to be really, really important this season. Without Rodri, if you look at that team, I honestly think that he is the player who provides the most control. We saw it in the treble winning season. He started pretty much every single game. And the reason he starts is because he provides a complete balance. He provides complete control to every single attack. He never, ever loses the ball. And it means that we're a lot harder to transition against. And yeah, as you mentioned, I think he's going to be really, really important. I'd be very surprised not to see him start in all of the big games.
Can the real Bernardo Silva please stand up? Because he's a player that gets all the credit when he's playing well, but when he has a few dodgy games or he goes a bit quiet, nobody really criticises him because City have got an abundance of good players. But when you talk about control, he's a player that can do that. In terms of his ball retention, he's amazing. Got some decent ball retainers in there. You've got Kovacic, who's great at ball retention, Bernardo and Jack Grealish. So there's no reason why City can't have the element of control that they had with Rodri in there. But I want to see Bernardo step up to the plate, where De Bruyne's in and out of the side and Rodri's out the side. We talk about this player being world class. Go and show that you're world class and really imprint your mark on this City side.
I love that. I'm not going to talk so much more about Bernardo Silva. It might get very... Someone might get upset with me. And I don't want to do
I
that.
think hands will be thrown.
Yeah.
So we better leave it there.
Score predictions for this one.
You know, sometimes as a fan, you just have like a weird feeling, don't you? I don't feel positive about this game. I don't know why. I'm going to go for a 2-2 draw because you never want to back against your team online, but that's not really what I think.
2-2 draw means you think they're
2-2 draw means a potential 2-1 to Newcastle. I do think there could be a slip up this weekend.
Yeah, I'm going for a draw as well, 1-1. I think the Newcastle, with the fans behind them, at least like getting on the score sheet, get a draw in this one.
I think 2-1 to City. I think they'll grind it out, last minute header, and people get like the fear factor will be back.